Okay, so what we're working on today is mounting all of the various bits and pieces. So for example, this is the original return line from the SN95 Hydro Boost, as well as a return line from the power steering. So this is all going to connect to our Volvo electric power steering and Hydro Boost pump, which is going to sit down in the well here. On top of this will be the factory 2018 airbox. We have to run the 2018 airbox as part of our conformance with the CARB emission controls. We're in the process of deleting some unnecessary vacuum lines and other lines. So for example, this line here formerly connected to the vacuum power brake booster on the 2018. Because we're retaining the 1999 Hydro Boost unit, we'll delete that vacuum line. So here you can see an example of one of the 99's air conditioning lines. Now this line will be modified a bit here at this bend so we can reconnect it to the 1999 AC condenser. We'll also be adding back in the other 99 AC condenser line, again slightly reconfigured due to the size and width of the 2018 Coyote and its exhaust system. On the other engine, these lines routed down to where it is basically where the #1 cylinder exhaust header goes.
And how about the, what do we have to do to the air conditioning?
What air conditioning? No, kidding. Interesting story. One of the things we've learned on this build is that the factory 2018 uses something called a stretch belt. That is a 6-rib belt that actually stretches over the back part of the damper pulley assembly here and goes directly to the 2018 air conditioning condenser. Now, we are reusing the 99 air conditioning condenser because A, its controls talk to the body module here on the 99, and B, because it very much simplifies the connection. We'll be reusing all of the connections for the AC lines to the condenser, out, back to the evap cans, and back into the unit under the dash. In order to do that, you cannot buy a stretch belt that will accommodate the slightly relocated 99 compressor. We're using a power by the hour relocation kit, which is basically a fancy spacer, to mount this compressor to the 2018. So what we've done instead is gone to a conventional, in this case, 4-rib belt, and this is the configuration as it comes on a 2018 F-150 5-liter. So what we've added is the F-150 5-liters tensioner, idler pulley, and as you can see, a 4-rib belt here that then wraps around this. So yes, it's only a 4-rib belt, but this is what they run in the factory, and you'll note that this pulley up top is only configured for a 4-rib belt. So there is no option to go back to, say, a 6-rib, which we are told is unnecessary. You can see that this tensioner provides 180 degrees of wrap on the air conditioning pulley itself and almost 270 degrees of wrap around the damper pulley. So plenty of engagement to keep that AC running, so Rick will be cool and comfortable when he goes out to the track to thrash all those pesky guys in their Corvettes and Porsches. Now, one of the most important pieces of equipment from the 2018 Mustang GT is this. Now, some of you may not be familiar with this as we talk about our friends at Jags. This piece of equipment installs here on the inlet side of the airbox assembly and then connects over to the firewall, something like so. Now, in case you're wondering, what does this do? Does it improve emissions? Does it help save the environment? No, what this does, it allows the car to go because it's what makes the noise from the air intake, and they actually go through all of this to tune the sound from the air intake into the cabin of the 2018 Mustang. So after they spend all that money trying to get rid of the noise, vibration, and harshness, they add this guy so it goes. We're going to delete this.
On the firewall, you can see in phase 2 we showed you that we need to clear the firewall. I just want to point out that lip. A lot of guys talk about that lip's not necessary to take off, but yes, you can take your manifold off. We just thought just a lot easier to clean this up. You can see the stitch welding, repainted, and we're back in business.
What I'm holding in my hand is a marvelously well adapted clutch hydraulic line. So this line will connect from our 2018, now you've seen our other videos where we adapted the 2018 clutch master cylinder to the firewall here. So you can see down there the upper line is where the supply comes from, and then the lower one uses this snap together type fitting, which is all over the place on these modern Fords. So this has been silver brazed onto this 90-degree fitting, connected to a hose that we had made up by our friends at Mesa Hose, which is right down the street. We then connected it to another AN4 fitting, which has been silver brazed onto what was part of the original factory line that goes into the bell housing of the MT82. So it looks very much like this connection here. So what this is going to allow us to do is make a very tight turn that we have to make. Down below, this will connect, get popped into this fitting under here, just basically like so, except that I'm going to pop it into the fitting. And then this will go down underneath, and the orientation will be something like this as it goes into the bell housing on the MT82. So we started out trying to modify the hard line and get it to meet all the way up. What we ran into is the distance here from the end of the master cylinder to the block just did not allow enough room to make a bend in the factory line to this. So we've created this with the help of our friends over at Mesa Hose. The last part of our assembly for the clutch master cylinder is the clutch master cylinder reservoir. So we got this really nice little piece here. Just has a nice little screw-on cap, including its own little bellows. And this guy will then connect via this line, and it will plug in down on our clutch master cylinder. So this tube is going to connect onto that nipple right there. And then this guy will live right about here, so it's got a good gravity feed into the clutch master cylinder. Now, in order to bleed this style of clutch master cylinder, which does not have a bleeder screw, we will be setting up a bit of a Rube Goldberg contraption with a longer piece of line up to a larger reservoir that we will literally elevate up here with a large surface area, meaning a big funnel. And that will allow us to use air pressure to basically gravity feed and pull the air out of this, because we've located the lines and such so that it is a direct downhill flow from our clutch master cylinder through our line down into our slave cylinder at the clutch release pressure point itself. So that's how this piece will work, and we'll be showing you a little bit later in a separate technical video how the bleeding process works. Now, the second thing that sharp-eyed viewers will notice is the addition of our new fuel line. So what we've done here is run a new -6 PTFE fuel line all the way from the fuel tank at the back of the car. We followed the route of those lines all the way up to where we've come up through the fender well location, and here you can see our Aeromotive fuel filter assembly. Now, again, we're going -6 all the way front to back. The reason we've mounted the fuel filter in this location is that it allows us to open it up to do a physical inspection of the filter without having to spill a bunch of fuel all over the engine. So we can do a very easy inspection. We can do a very easy filter change. We're using Aeromotive's microglass filter on this car because for track days, we're going to be feeding this beast E85. We've got these connections that go from the -6 to the quick disconnects that are on the factory fuel rail right here. And then everything else is your traditional PTFE style -8 or -6 AN lines.
Some of you have been asking about how we mated the MT82 to the trans tunnel. And here's a couple things we had to do. The flange here is a custom-made flange that we ordered from our friends at Driveline here in Orange County. Great service. Came out, measured, made a custom drive shaft for us, and have this all buckled up. But this is a connection that you need. The other thing we did, you can see, is all the DEI paper in here, and the raised tunnel to accommodate the MGW shifter. You can see the the width here that's needed for the clearance of those remote arms to give the stability to the MT82 transmission. A lot of people don't like that remote arm. This eliminates it and really stiffens. We're going to show you the inside of the car, how perfectly that piece mounts up to the trans tunnel. And if you pan back just a little bit, you can see this a custom-made mid pipe here. This is actually a Dr. X mid pipe that we ran on the 99 Cobra, the 4.6, and we just cut and made some new pieces and mounted to the stock exhaust manifolds and cat. So these were shortened, and we added the Dr. Gas, just cut and paste a little bit. Something we do here at Big Hat Racing. Where we are on the front end of the car, driver's side, you can see the Volvo pump that we put in here. This is the new electric pump that we decided to go with. And you see the hole up in here where we drilled with a hole sawed so we can put the cap there. We had to keep it relatively low because the stock air box is going in right there. So here's all the lines. What's really cool about this with Volvo, it's a Ford Motor Company part. This is built when Ford owned Volvo. And so all these lines mated right up to the Volvo high pressure line. You can see how we bent the lines to make the new configuration. And we'll get that all hooked up today. The coilovers are back in. The new QA1 K-member is in, as you guys have seen, but the lower control arms, you can see this is a beautiful piece that matches with the QA1 K-member and these lower control arms. And then another nice blingy part, the bump steer kit, again from QA1. My hat's off to these guys. They really have helped a lot with this project. And we bought all this, as you know, we sourced through JAGS, and we continue to just really have good things to say about the service we're getting from the JAGS boys.
So the front end of the Coyote Cobra has this nose cone that everyone who has looked at a Cobra R is familiar with. Underneath this nose cone is this large foam block. So once we remove the nose cone, then what supports it underneath is this foam block. And underneath the foam block is this big piece of folded over steel that goes across, and it in turn is connected to two crumple zone blocks on either side. Now, what is not part of the build is this aluminum piece here, which is really just a large straight edge, and that's because as part of the process here we have removed the unnecessary sections of this block in order to create a larger opening and take about 20 pounds of weight off of the nose of the car. So what that leaves us with is a larger frontal opening. These will be blocked off for airflow, so we'll force the airflow from that opening in the Cobra R nose piece, and that will give us enhanced airflow into our coolers, the radiator, and the other things that we've done, and we'll be updating you on that soon.
You got to take a look inside the MGW shifter. A lot of guys on Facebook have been asking about, hey, how's that thing work? How does it sit inside the cockpit? We're darn close to the original SN95 shift location. Sits a tad bit higher, so we'll finish a box out through here and put the shift boot back on it. But you can see just a beautiful piece of machinery, and it fits in here just really, really nice.
So the black painted area is the raised transmission tunnel, right?
Yes, yeah. That's what you saw in the earlier video, phase 2, that Carl tacked and welded in. You can see the finished product and how it sits in there.
All right, guys, so we said we'd talk a little bit more about some of the mods we've made. Specifically in this case, because this is a car that spent significant time on the road racing track, we've added two coolers here. Power steering cooler and the oil cooler. Now we'll start here talking about the power steering cooler, because this is not just power steering, it's also the cooling for the same fluid that operates the Hydro Boost brakes. So as you know, we've installed over here the Volvo power steering and Hydro Boost pump, and we'll be walking through how all that got connected in a moment. But part of what we did is we repurposed the original factory cooler, which was just a tube loop cooler that went across the front of the radiator here. So in doing so, we just cut the line, made a little bend down on each one. That gave us 2 loops to go into this plate style cooler so that we get that extra cooling to keep all those systems working well and avoid boiling all the fluids. Now, where that starts is over here with these lines that came out of the factory plumbing. So that factory plumbing is all part of stuff that we were able to relocate without having to actually make any new high pressure lines or even remake any of the low pressure return lines that come from the rack. So over here you can see, here's our original rack. And so one of our coolant return lines is here, and it goes loop through, goes through the loop cooler into the cooler up, in front of the radiator and condenser assembly. Now the other return line routes from the Hydro Boost system and comes out here underneath the fender well. And here we had to make a little change and add about 2 feet of the high pressure tube in order to make sure that we connected to the same original manifold, which is this little assembly right here that goes into the Volvo power steering pump. Now the other thing we had to do is work with the high pressure lines. So on the high pressure feed, the way this setup works is we have high pressure line number 1 that comes out here. Kind of see where my finger, a lot of tubing going up and around in here. Comes out of the pump. This line is fed up through the fender well over the top to the Hydro Boost unit. So that's the first place that it uses this high pressure fluid, is in the Hydro Boost. Then it comes back out under pressure from the Hydro Boost unit back through the fender well. And you can see again here where we've rebent and repurposed the original line, and it goes into the power steering rack. And then both of those have the lines, as I showed a moment ago, that are the low pressure lines that go back through the cooler and then back into the pump reservoir here underneath the front fender. So the thing that we're kind of happy with on this is we were able to do all of these changes and do all of this with one simple addition of line for a low pressure line, and we simply rebent and relocated all of the high pressure lines. And that did another thing for us, which it gave us room for the factory style air box that we have to run to be carb legal on this car. So we'll be showing that a little bit later on in the mods part of this discussion. Now the other thing that we've done to make this car, as we mentioned, better for the track and also to fit some of these components is we had to use MMR's Trax, T-R-A-X kit to relocate the factory output for the oil filter and the factory style water cooled setup for the oil cooler mechanism, because it was right in the middle of the big sway bar that we have on this car that makes it work so good at the track. So because of where the 2018's alternator sits, where the big 1999 inch and a quarter sway bar sits, we needed to relocate that. So MMR provided this really nice looking block plate up here. And then we used a set of fittings. So this is all Dash 10 hose. Their kit comes with a complete set of fittings. However, we learned that we needed, in order to clear some of the components in the 99 chassis. So for example, we substituted in this 45-degree fitting for one of the 90s, because that allowed us to properly clear where our sender is going to be for the water temperature. So we come out of the supply line that comes out of the oil pump, and it loops all the way through the front, all the way into the inlet side of our oil cooler. Oil circulates. You notice these coolers have all been set up so that they feed from the bottom. That's to minimize air pockets and bubbles. so that we get the maximum use of the cooler. The output then of the oil cooler flows back around and goes up into the second MMR piece, which is this remote oil filter holder. So we come out of that, we go up through this. This is another fitting we had to add. This is a 150 degree -10 fitting into the top of the filter here. And then it comes out of the clean oil, comes out and through this line back into the inlet side, and that 45 degree fitting back into the motor to keep the motor all nice and heavy with lots of cool oil. Now, one of the other things we had to do as part of this was this unit here is the 2018 oil pressure sender that is connected to the 2018 harness on the 2018 Cobra engine. So we have a buddy here in our complex that was able to actually make for us this little brass adapter here into a 90 degree adapter into what is normally an oil pressure gauge port here on the MMR filter bracket. So you can see that goes in and it will connect into the factory harness. So that gives you some sense of what we did to both make so we could fit everything under the car, but also add cooling capacity and also add the ability to have a much larger filter that's easier to access in terms of doing changes and checking that out. So with that, as always, I want to remind everybody we've been happy to work with Jegs and all of our other sponsors, as you may have noticed. And this has been Bill with Big Hat Racing.